The most famous philosopher who ever lived never wrote a single word. Not a letter, not a treatise, not even a note in the margin. Everything we think we know about Socrates was written by someone else. We don't know Socrates. We know the people who wrote about him, and those people disagreed profoundly. To understand this silence, we need to examine the only voices we have. Our first witness is Xenophon, a soldier, a gentleman farmer, a man of practical good sense. His book, the Memorabilia, gives us a Socrates who is useful and respectable, a wise neighbor who dispenses sensible advice about managing households and choosing friends. Xenophon's Socrates is perfectly reasonable and completely forgettable. The problem, Xenophon was not a philosopher. He couldn't follow Socrates into the deep water. He painted a photograph when he needed to capture lightning. He recorded the surface and missed the earthquake underneath. The result is a portrait that strips Socrates of everything that made Athens put him on trial and made history remember his name. Our second witness is Plato, and Plato is a different problem entirely. He was both a literary genius and a philosophical heavyweight. He could follow Socrates into the deepest territory and dramatize it beautifully. His dialogues present a Socrates who is transcendent, relentless, driven by what the Greeks called a daimonion, a divine inner spirit. In ancient Greek, demonic doesn't mean evil. It means touched by something beyond the human. But Plato couldn't resist sculpting his teacher into an ideal, like a Greek statue carved from a living man. Too perfect, too luminous, too far above the merely human. The real Socrates is somewhere between a wise man and a demigod. We may never pin him down. Even if we can't reconstruct the man, we can reconstruct the world he was responding to. That world was shaped by three powerful intellectual currents. The first, Pythagoras. Forget the triangle theorem for a moment. Pythagoras ran what amounted to a religious cult, a monastic community in southern Italy with strict rules. Members couldn't eat beans, couldn't wear wool, couldn't pick up fallen objects. They believed in reincarnation. At the heart of it all was a conviction that numbers are sacred objects, the hidden skeleton of reality itself. Mathematics wasn't calculation. It was a religious act, imposing cosmos, order, onto chaos. For Pythagoras, to discover a mathematical ratio in nature was to glimpse the divine architecture of existence. Socrates absorbed this hunger deeply, the drive to find underlying structure beneath the chaos of surface appearances. The second current flowed from Ionia, the islands and coastal cities between Greece and Asia Minor. Thinkers like Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes did something unprecedented. They explained nature without gods. Their project was materialist, rational, and purposeless. Nature was just stuff in motion, water, air, fire, an undefined, boundless substance. And here is the image that captures the revolution. The sun was no longer Apollo's golden chariot blazing across the heavens. It was a hot rock. Well, that sounds like progress. Socrates saw it as a catastrophe. Here is why. In the mythological worldview, nature, religion, and social obligation were fused into a single system. The sun wasn't just an astronomical object, it was a god. When a Greek swore an oath by the sun, he invoked divine authority. The god Helios witnessed the promise, and breaking it meant divine punishment. Now strip away the god. If the sun is merely a hot rock floating in space, then an oath sworn by the sun is just noise, words aimed at an indifferent lump of matter. Extend this logic across the entire moral framework. Greek law, family obligation, civic trust, all of it rested on a religious scaffolding that assumed the gods were woven into nature. The Ionian physicists didn't just update the astronomy. They pulled the foundations out from under the entire ethical structure. Socrates recognized the pattern. Materialist physics generates a centrifugal force. It atomizes everything it touches. Break matter into purposeless particles, and you break society into purposeless individuals. each one unbound by anything larger than self-interest. The crisis wasn't scientific, it was moral, and it didn't stay in the physics classroom. It walked into the courtroom. The Sophists were the political inheritors of Ionian physics. Their reasoning was straightforward. If there is no natural moral order, if right and wrong are just conventions invented by the powerful, then the clever person doesn't seek truth. The clever person seeks advantage. And the Sophists built a technique for it. Technique, the Greek word for art or craft, the root of our word technical, denoting a skill that can be systematically taught. Their technique was rhetoric, the art of making the weaker argument appear the stronger. They traveled from city to city, offering instruction to ambitious young men, and they charged handsomely for it. The Ionians dissolved the gods in nature, the Sophists dissolved the gods in politics, and they charged tuition. This is why Socrates treated the Sophists as his primary adversaries. They weren't just wrong. They were the living proof of what happens when materialist thinking invades the moral sphere. The word sophist comes from Sophia, wisdom. They claimed to sell wisdom. Socrates argued they sold manipulation dressed in wisdom's clothing. Now we can see the full picture. We know a practical advisor drawn by a man who couldn't see what was extraordinary about him. We know a transcendent hero sculpted by a man who couldn't resist making his teacher into something more than human. And we know the battlefield Socrates chose to fight on. A world where Pythagorean mathematics promised hidden order beneath the surface, Ionian physics threatened to dissolve all meaning into purposeless matter, and the Sophists were cashing in on the wreckage. The Socrates problem isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a reminder that the most influential ideas in history are often the ones we can never fully recover, and every philosophical project is a response to a crisis. Socrates didn't philosophize in a vacuum. He philosophized because his world was coming apart, because the intellectual tools that had liberated Greek, sought from myths, were simultaneously destroying the moral foundations of Greek life. Socrates never wrote a word, but the silence he left behind has been louder than almost anything ever written.